What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's going on, guys? It's the Week 5 UFL breakdown. I'm here with Millionaire Maker winner and one of the winningest spring football DFS players of all time, Neil Orfield. Neil, how you doing?
I'm doing well. This is one of the crazier slates we've seen with all these changing parts at quarterback. A lot of weird stuff going on this slate. Ready for the NFL draft. Less excited about it than I was last year when the Vikings were supposedly going after JJ McCarthy. Like that was pretty exciting for me. Don't have anything that I really care about this year with the Vikings. But yeah, excited for today. Do you care about the NFL draft at all?
I do. So I grew up a Bears fan, and then obviously went to school at Cincinnati. So I'm kind of partial to both the Bears and the Bengals. Very interested to see what both teams do. I know the prevailing rumor right now is Bears are going to trade up for Ashton Genty, which as like a football lover, I kind of think is cool. Pair the Heisman Trophy winner with a great offensive coordinator with this amazing running back. But obviously, from any sort of practical football standpoint, taking a running back in the top 10. Probably not the best idea. So yeah, I'm pretty
Especially
interested
when you're trading draft capital for that.
Yeah, that doesn't feel great to me. But yeah, I mean, overall, generally excited to see where a lot of these prospects land, and I've dabbled a little bit in the best ball streets, so nice to get a little bit more, I guess, firmness, so to speak, on how to evaluate a lot of these prospects. But yeah, overall pretty excited. I know obviously the draft is the main show in town this weekend, but me and Neil, we're spring ball guys. We care about football being played right now, not some hypothetical football being played by guys who aren't even on teams right now in the distant future. So we're here to talk spring ball. But if you are betting any player props or playing DFS for the UFL, I think you're going to want to subscribe to either our UFL package or our all-in package over at Fantasy Points. All-in includes UFL, college football, NFL, and the Fantasy Points data suite. You can actually save 20% on our all-in package with promo code ALLUFL. I know a lot of people tend to subscribe right before the football season starts, NFL, college football. A lot of people also subscribe around the draft. So if that's you're itching for some draft content, some of that Scott Barrett, Ryan Heath, Brett Whitefield, all the good stuff that we have over at Fantasy Points, promo code ALLUFL will save you 20% on an all-in sub. But here's what you get in just UFL. You get projections for every player in every game, main slate DFS ownership projections, a weekly written breakdown of the DFS slate. This week's is free, so you can go check that out over on the site. Access to our paywall Discord, where I provide notes on coach speak, insider info, and breakdowns of single game showdown and Sunday only DFS slates. I really think the paywall Discord is a huge value prop. So definitely go ahead and get in there if you have a sub. And you also get our official picks for player props. Over a 20% ROI for us on the season on player props has been pretty strong. We also just cut the price of our full season UFL product to $70 for the rest of the season. This will probably be our last discount until right before the playoffs. So certainly a great time to subscribe to either All In or UFL over on Fantasy Points, given the discounts that we have available. Neil, let's talk some ball. Friday night game kicks off 8 p.m. as always. Memphis Showboats at the Birmingham Stallions. Memphis is an 11.5 point underdog here. Total is 37.5. Need to talk injuries, but before we do you have any interest in this game line? 37.5 total. Birmingham favored by 11.5. That feels about right to me. Where are you at?
I feel like 11.5 is a bit much for me. I think just that it's just such a massive line for games that are move fast and are typically low scoring. It's just like a really wide line. So if I were going to bet anything, I would bet that the spread does not cover, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would, if I had to bet something for this game, I probably would take Memphis. Birmingham obviously down to their quarterback 3, which we will talk about shortly. But this does feel like one of the sharper lines of the week overall. I actually think there's some decent value on a couple of these Sunday games here. On the injury side, Memphis, Elijah Stove and Kai Loxley are both out on the Memphis side. For Birmingham, Matt Corral is still injured. He will be the emergency quarterback 3 for Birmingham. That means Philadelphia Stars legend, spring football legend, former Memphis Showboats quarterback, Case Cookus, will start against his former team tomorrow night. Other big note for Memphis, we'll start off on the Memphis side here. Dresser Wynn will be the starting quarterback. No Troy Williams. EJ Perry will be the backup. Troy Williams, emergency QB3. Neil, Dresser Wynn, $6K. That's obviously a great price for a starting quarterback in spring football. The problem is he's more of a pocket passer, and I actually just checked Vegas lines about an hour before the show. This line's moved against Memphis, was plus 10.5, now plus 11.5. That implies a 13-point implied team total for the Memphis Showboats. So, $6K for Dresser Wynn, it's tough to balance. I mean, he only needs a couple passing touchdowns to get you there. Not a guy who's historically run. Before I hand it off to you, Neil, I also did want to note that Memphis has said they're going to change their terminology and really move this offense over to Noel Mazzone's system. They were using Ken Wisenhunt's terminology last week with Noel Mazzone coordinating the offense. This will now be Noel Mazzone's offense moving forward. I really wish there was a showdown slate for this game because interim head coach Jim Turner also noted that they're probably going to get the tight ends more involved. In 2022, when Mazzone was calling plays for the New Orleans Breakers, Sal Cannella posted an 18% target share. Obviously, he's a better receiver than either Chris Pierce or JJ Wilson, but I do expect a little more tight end involvement that probably isn't super relevant for the main slate. And then finally, Neil, I have to read the quote on Dresser Wynn from interim head coach Jim Turner, because initially I thought, okay, Dresser Wynn's starting, but it'll probably be a rotation between him and EJ Perry. But I'm going to give you the ultimate football guy quote, and you tell me how many reps you think Dresser Wynn is going to get. On Wednesday, interim head coach Jim Turner noted, Dresser Wynn is starting the game, and he's going to play. And he's going to play right through that game, and he's going to play that game. He's going to be our quarterback in that football game. Neil, what are your thoughts on that quote, on Dresser Wynn, and more broadly speaking on this Memphis passing offense?
Yeah, love that quote. I particularly like the first part where he's going to start and he's going to play. So, I mean, that's good to clarify that he is going to play after he starts the game. Yeah, I think that I would have the same takeaway as you, like from like you read the full quote. It sounds mostly like he's saying like he's going to be our quarterback for the entire game. He's going to play the entire game. I don't know like that's a lock, but I think like that is my takeaway from the quote. Also, I think it's probably going to depend on how he's actually doing. Like my guess would be that the QB3 doesn't have an extremely long leash, but yeah, it sounds to me like there is a greater than 50% chance that he plays more than 90% of the snaps. Like maybe they bring in another quarterback for some specific plays, but yeah, it sounds like he's the guy.
Yeah. And I think that's, probably the best argument to play him is like we have decent confidence that he's going to get 100% of snaps. He's obviously going to be forced to throw here as 11.5-point underdogs. Of course, starting the season out as the quarterback 3 for an offense that just really hasn't shown much isn't a great sign. But Jim Turner, the interim head coach, said that Ken Wisenhunt never really gave Dresser Wynn a chance. Allegedly because the team traded for EJ Perry, they kind of thought that they owed him, more of a starting role there. And I suppose because of Troy Williams, previous pedigree in spring football, they gave him the second chance, and Dresser Wynn really never got first team reps headed into the season. Jim Turner seemed relatively disappointed in the way that Wisenhunt kind of handled that quarterback rotation. So based on how much we've seen out of EJ Perry and Troy Williams, I really wouldn't be surprised to see a lot out of Dresser Wynn here. The other interesting thing for Memphis is we saw this wide receiver rotation sort of open up last week. Kwame Lassiter was closer to 80% of routes. Jonathan Adams was only at about 62% of routes. But things should be a lot more condensed. As I noted sort of when we started talking about this game, no Eli Stove, no Kai Loxley. So I am expecting full-time route shares for Kwame Lassiter, Jonathan Adams, and also D. Anderson on the outside. D. Anderson, only 3,600. Profiles as an interesting value. Problem is there just isn't a ton of fantasy points to go around in this passing offense. Yeah, Neil, what are your thoughts on playing a 4-5% owned Dresser Wynn? Yeah, any thoughts there? And who do you want to pair him with? I feel like pretty reasonable to go with any of Kwame Lassiter, Jonathan Adams, or D. Anderson. I do think that Wynn plus D. Anderson is almost too much salary savings. I mean, who are you really paying up for if you're playing that combo? Sure, Jacob Saylors, but even these higher end wide receivers aren't, amazing clicks this week. So curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean the most appealing aspect of Dress or Win, I think, is I guess it's the combination of he's min priced and he's getting minimal ownership. So
Yeah.
from those two angles, it's like, yeah, he hasn't been good. He wasn't that great of a college prospect. He hasn't been good in general. So don't love that. Like because the UFL is probably a step. I mean, it's a step above college football. Like these are better players than the typical college programs. So it's going to be tougher competition. But sometimes quarterbacks do get better as they get older. They get a little bit more mature, maybe a little bit calmer. So it's possible that he does get better just from aging a little bit, maturing a little bit.
Yeah.
I think at 4% ownership, I will likely be slightly overweight. Like I'm not like super excited to play him, but we do have, like you said, a fairly condensed rotation here. I always like a condensed rotation, knowing who we are stacking him with. There's also like you could make the argument that you don't need to stack him because part of the reason we're playing him is that price tag. And I guess I'll say this. I think if I'm hand building a lineup with Dress or Win, I would make sure I'm using enough of the salary cap that you could not play any other quarterback there, because I'm not expecting him to put up 25 fantasy points. I think it's pretty unlikely that he is one of the highest scoring quarterbacks. I guess it could happen. Like we don't know. He could be better than we're expecting at this point. But like, I want to play for the outcome where he puts up 9 fantasy points and is still the quarterback you need, just because of that $6,000 price tag. And the way to do that is to use the full salary cap, because he is significantly cheaper than every other quarterback on the slate. So yeah, I think I'll probably be a little bit overweight on Win, but I'm not dying to play him because we don't think he's going to be very good. He also is like they are a big underdog, so he should be forced to throw a lot. So there are some things in his favor that make me think that we should consider playing him. So yeah, I think I'll be a little bit overweight to Dress or Win. I think I'll be underweight to Jonathan Adams. We've got him at 20% ownership right now. To me, with the bad quarterback play and the team having such a low implied team total, I'd rather go elsewhere if I'm paying up. And Jonathan Adams is seemingly diminishing role. All of those combined, I want to be underweight to Jonathan Adams. I want to be overweight to Kwame Lassiter, as you alluded to. He's 5,300, still not getting crazy high ownership, and he might be the wide receiver 1 on this team at this point, just based on what we saw last week. So I think Kwame Lassiter is somebody that I'll probably be overweight on. Jonathan Adams, I'd rather pay up elsewhere at wide receiver. And then D Anderson 3,600, sure, I'll mix him in. Like, he's probably the wide receiver 3. I think that's totally fine. Chris Pierce, more of a showdown play if you want to mix him in. Like, I don't even know if, like you said, like I don't know that we need the salary savings. If you can find a lineup that looks awesome, that is just like a stack of Dress or Win to Chris Pierce, and then you love the rest of your lineup, then sure, I don't hate doing that. But I don't know that we have that on this slate. We just don't have that many players that we really want to pay up for.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think the way I'm viewing, I love that note, by the way, on making sure that you use all your salary in Dress or Win lineups. I think that's particularly sharp. D Anderson, I think I'm mostly just going to use as a way to get off of the Braylon Sanders chalk. If you want to pay down at wide receiver, Braylon Sanders is the very clear number 1 way to do so. And I think D Anderson is a solid pivot off that if you want to save a little bit of ownership there. Furby in the chat, shout out Furby, was asking what we think about Dress or Win plus 500 for 200 yards on FanDuel. Certainly like that. I think that's pretty interesting. Obviously there's some benching risk, but at 5-1, I mean, I think that's pretty reasonable. We've seen FanDuel pretty consistently copying the medians that we've posted over on fantasypoints.com. Last week, I looked at all the lines where FanDuel was minus 114 on either side, and the R squared between those numbers and our numbers ended up being 0.998. But it does seem like they're really miscalculating some of these like tail outcomes. We saw that last week with, putting a huge number out on Bryce Perkins to go for 50 plus rushing yards. Unfortunately, that didn't hit, but I do think that was a great bet. Similar this week with, the bet that Furby pointed out on Dress or Win. I also think Deon Cain, we'll talk about the Birmingham side in a little bit. Deon Cain, 70 plus receiving yards is plus 750 over on FanDuel. I think that's a solid bet as well. We've been a little slow to add props to our thread because sites have been slow to post them, but I will probably add that and get the thread started right after the show. Need to talk this backfield really quick. And I didn't include this quote in my article, but I did adjust projections slightly off of this. Jim Turner's Wednesday media availability obviously was full of sort of football guy quotes. But he did say, very clearly that Deneric Prince is their RB1 and and he didn't say it like this part particularly clearly. It was a little more ambiguous, but he did sort of hint that they may want to get Pierce going a little bit more. The way that he laid it out was, Pierce is clearly our best back. He's our RB1. Cabote has done some good stuff. And then there's also Jalen Jackson. Jalen Jackson is going to be active as the RB2 this week. In previous weeks, we've generally seen Prince and the RB2 in pretty close to a 50-50 split evenly. This week, I'm projecting a little bit closer to 60-40, which would be pretty tempting, Neil, if we didn't expect Memphis to get totally blown out here. How are you viewing Deneric Prince on a week where, sure, maybe he could get a little bit more work, but, obviously Memphis's implied total is only 13 points.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing you can say for Deneric Prince is this is a really ugly slate for running backs in general.
Yeah.
There's not many running backs that I'm super confident in. So I think, if the coaches are suggesting they want to get him more involved, I was reading your weighted opportunity chart earlier, and I thought it was funny that Deneric Prince is like the one constant. They've been rotating the other two back and forth, yet both of them on a per game basis have better weighted opportunities than Deneric Prince. It's like he's like the guy who's always there, but they don't really give him many great opportunities. So, but if the coach is saying that's going to change, then sure, I'll play a little bit of Deneric Prince. I don't know I'll be that far off from where the field is. We've got him around 8%. I mean, he's expensive enough that I'm not like in love with the play. So yeah, I think that seems about right to me. About 8% seems fine. And that's largely just because the slate is so ugly. Like there's not much that looks good here with split backfield. They're expected to put up 13 points. Like there's not a lot going for Deneric Prince. But the 8% ownership on the slate with gross running back play, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Last week was the first week that we saw Deneric Prince earn a higher share of backfield weighted opportunity than his backup. Snaps were split almost perfectly even, 49% for Prince, 51% for Jacob Cabote. Again, I'm sort of anticipating a little closer to 60-40. Wouldn't be shocked if it was 50-50. Maybe we even get a little bit more for Prince. Hard to say. Again, this will be the first full week of Noel Mazzone's offensive system. We can talk about the Birmingham side here, Neil. Case Cookus, only 7,700. And to make things even better, it's a plus matchup. Memphis is allowing the third highest yards per attempt in the UFL. And I think this really is the most important note, Birmingham has been very unsuccessful running the ball. They have the highest pass rate in the UFL overall, and they have the second highest pass rate when leading. So this is a really, really good spot for Case Cookus from a volume perspective. Also going to be pretty highly owned, 24%. Where are you at on Cookus? And, pass catchers kind of feel like the same old, so we can probably breeze through them, but really curious on your thoughts on Case Cookus here.
I think he's the best quarterback play on the slate. He's getting ownership like it. He is also projected to be the chalkiest quarterback on the slate, but I think that's totally warranted. He's only 7,700 in the best possible spot. I mean, it's been the same thing with Birmingham. They can't run the ball. They just want to pass the ball because they don't have an offensive line that can block for the run, it seems. So they should be throwing quite a bit in a good spot here. So yeah, I think he's a cash game lock, I would say. And in tournaments, I probably like him better than 24%. I think I'll probably be overweight 24% on Cookus here.
Yeah, very reasonable. I think, probably the only downside argument would be Birmingham could get such a big lead here that, maybe they bring in the backup. I believe it's Andrew Peasley, I want to say, who's the quarterback too. He was fairly recently signed. Could also argue that, maybe they get the ground game going a little bit more here, but, still we've seen Birmingham very consistent, just chucking the ball a ton. And we know Cookus is certainly down to throw the ball downfield. Only other thing I wanted to note with Cookus is that, there's a little bit more injury risk than your average quarterback. I mean, this guy throws his body around. First play last week, he hands it off to CJ Maribel. Maribel dances a little bit, and Cookus just sprints forward, throws his body into a linebacker. Joel Klatt said this on the broadcast, but I had the exact same thought when I rewatched the play. Like, he's a football player. Like, this is a guy who, if you let him, would totally play linebacker for the Stallions. Obviously not athletic enough to do so, but I really love the way Case Cookus plays. If I were his wife, I would be terrified watching him play. Though, when it comes to pass catchers, Neil, I mean, Deion Kane is, sort of expected to lead the way here. His route share did dip to right around 50% last week, which was a little weird, but he was also on the injury report to start this week. So I do think that could have been injury related. He also missed week 3 due to the birth of his child. So that missed practice combined with maybe a little bit of an injury, I think largely contributed to that route dip. I mean, outside of him, Jay Sternberger, yeah, Davion Davis. I don't really have a ton of strong opinions. I think this is probably a mix and match spot for me. I like Jordan Thomas a little bit. Jordan Thomas's average depth of target is 21 right now, and we know they like him in the red zone. So he's a little interesting. I really wish we had like a showdown slate or a 2-game slate with this game, because I just jam in Jordan Thomas, but unfortunately not for the Friday night game. Where are you at on these pass catchers?
Yeah, I think that there are Deion Kane, I think, is the best option. I like that note. I didn't realize he missed for the birth of his child, but yeah, I think he's still their best pass catcher in general. So yeah, like Deion Kane quite a bit. I like Jay Sternberger quite a bit. Outside of week 1, which as you pointed out was maybe it was an injury, right? That was we suspect he was, or he missed practice, or I forget what it was, but they cut off the conference call. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. There were some technical difficulties. Holt started to get into it. I think what he was about to start to say was that he missed some time in training camp, likely due to an injury, but also you never know what these guys have going on in their personal lives or whatever. So not sure of the exact reason, but I do believe he missed some camp, and that was what led to the week 1 route share dip.
Yeah, but I mean, Deion Kane, we've got him at just 9% ownership. I like that quite a bit. I'll be overweight to that for sure. Love that stack. Jay Sternberger at 4,600, getting 4% ownership. I mean, that to me, I'm going to be significantly overweight there as well. So I really do like some of these pass catchers. Jordan Thomas, I think he's even playable on the main slate, just given that they actually target Jordan Thomas. Like, he doesn't run that many routes, but they target him when he's out there, and they target him down the field. So a lot going for Jordan Thomas. I think he's totally reasonable. Davion Davis at 6,000 is fine. Not like a standout 9% ownership, but totally fine to me. I don't know that I'll get to Jalen Camp at all. He's borderline to me. Marlon Williams kind of borderline. But yeah, at the top, I really like both Deion Kane, Jay Sternberger. Those two in particular really stand out to me. And then I think you can mix in some Davion Davis. 9%, I think that's totally reasonable ownership on Davion Davis, and Jordan Thomas at 3% seems fine at 3,300.
Yeah, Sternberger, I mean, that 4,600 price tag is very, very nice. I do think I'll probably end up bumping his ownership a little bit. But generally with Birmingham, I mean, this is a spot where I'm often just kind of letting the projections and my optimizer plus, a couple rules push me toward my exposures on these guys. But yeah, Sternberger at 4,600. I mean, if he didn't fumble, 2 weeks ago on that play where he was going into the end zone, he'd probably be, 5,300 and projecting for like 10 or 12% ownership. So certainly like that there, but I'd imagine he would come in a little higher than what we currently have projected. This backfield, I think we can breeze through. CJ Maribel, Ricky Person. Unfortunately, guys, this is the first time in UFL history Birmingham is keeping 3 running backs active. Larry Roundtree is up for this game. I really wanted to bust out my Ricky Person shirt, Neil, but I don't think it's the week for it. Not really sure what to expect from this 3-man committee. I only gave Roundtree like 10% carry share, 1% target share, very, very little work. I do expect it to be mostly Maribel and Person. I think, though, they kept Roundtree up because Person just isn't quite 100%. So I do expect Maribel to lead the way here, but probably a super gross rotation. Any interest in any of these guys? I maybe have a little bit of love for Maribel, but I mean, this is tough, even though Birmingham's implied for a slate high implied total here.
Agreed. This is one of the toughest spots that we've seen. I think it's like, because I do want to play a running back in this situation, but I have no idea which running back to play, and I don't want to play like 20% each of these guys, something like that. So it ends up being kind of I kind of feel like I should be playing somebody here. I'm not really enthusiastic about any of them though. And they've struggled to run as you pointed out, like their offensive line has just not been great against the run. So we got Maribel 7,300. We've got, and I also kind of wonder if they actually like Larry Roundtree. Like, I think he was actually like kind of decent. Was he not pretty decent last week? Whoa.
Well, so I mean, he was better last week, and he saw better usage last week than he did in his previous game when he was just with Ricky Person. But my impression with Roundtree is that they just obviously do not trust him as much as these other backs. Maybe we see that change a little bit. I mean, sure, like there's even a chance this could just be like 33, 33, 33 in terms of usage. That would be pretty surprising to me, but it is possible. I think the other issue with both Maribel and Person is that because it's such a weak running back slate, both of these guys are projecting for kind of decent ownership right now, which, you know, if either of them were going to be sub 10%, I'd be pretty excited. Right now we have Maribel at 17, Person at 15. Obviously that does feel a little high to me, but I'm struggling to find a way to get them down because you do have to play one running back. And not everyone's going to be playing Jacob Saylors because he's a little expensive. So yeah, this is a tough running back week, and I'm really not sure what to do with these two.
Yeah, I think we can probably stay away from Larry Roundtree. Like nobody's going to play him. I'm tempted because he's 4,800, and I don't know. I thought there were some situations last week where it like seemed to me like maybe he's kind of growing on them a little bit, but I don't remember exactly why. I was just kind of watching the game. I thought, maybe they actually don't totally hate Larry Roundtree. But yeah, Maribel 17% is a bit too much to me if it's going to be a three-headed monster. I'm probably not going to be like, my guess is that I get to double digits, so I'm probably not too far off, but my guess is I'll be a little bit underweight on CJ Maribel. Ricky Person, because he's 6,300, if he's not banged up, I would definitely have interest in that because we think he's talented. Now he's down to 6,300 in a great spot where they should be wanting to run a lot. But then it's like, if he is banged up at all, then they're not going to use him if they get a big lead and they want to run out the clock. He's probably not going to be the one doing it. I don't know. It's gross. I'll probably end up underweight on all of them. I guess Roundtree not really going to get any ownership. But yeah, I'll have a bit, I think, at least of the top two of Maribel and Person. I'll have some, but I'll probably be a little bit underweight and just kind of hold my breath and hope that one of them doesn't separate.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I think, clear preference for me toward Maribel, but I doubt I'll get that far ahead of the ownership that we have projected here. All right, let's move on to the lone game on Saturday. It's the Michigan Panthers at the St. Louis Battlehawks. Total here is 37.5. Panthers are 2.5 point favorites. Neil, any bets you like here? This line, I feel pretty similarly as the last game. I feel like this game's about correctly priced.
Yeah, I think debating if I want to take the under just because Duggan didn't look really good last week, so it's possible, but maybe they just run it more. Pretty good defenses too, I think, on both these teams. Like neither of them are bad defensively, so they're dealing with new quarterbacks / a weird quarterback rotation. So yeah, I think if I were going to bet anything, it would probably be the under, but I don't feel that strongly about it.
Yep, think that is fair. A couple injury notes on the Michigan side. Devin Ross has not practiced due to a hand injury. I don't think that would impact wide receiver rotations a ton, but it would free up probably a couple targets for the standard starters there. I do think he's likely to miss. Danny Etling is expected to return this week. I have a Coach Nolan quote on that. On the St. Louis side, Hakeem Butler is back from his hamstring injury. Otherwise, this game is mostly clean. Neil, we can start with the Michigan side. And like I said, I have a couple Mike Nolan quotes to help us out with player usage this week. Bryce Perkins, I think if the voting was today, would win UFL MVP. That is despite only playing one full game. And yet, despite Bryce Perkins being the favorite for UFL MVP, Mike Nolan on Wednesday said, Danny Etling has been cleared. We will decide when we get closer to the game as far as how the pattern we use quarterbacks at the position. I'm confident in both players. Nobody loses their job because of injury. That will not change at the quarterback position. I'm loosely anticipating Perkins starts, probably gets the first quarter. Etling gets the second quarter, and then the team remembers, oh yeah, Bryce Perkins is the better quarterback, gives him the entire second half. We have a 75-25 split projected. This could very easily end up as 50-50. There's also a chance, I think, that this could end up as a full game for Bryce Perkins. So, Neil, I'll throw it over to you. Do you have any interest in a Bryce Perkins who's probably capped at 75% of snaps, but maybe not if he plays really well and the team decides they don't want to see any more Danny Etling? Kind of a weird spot.
It's a really weird spot and not a great matchup either with St. Louis, but also like should be competitive. I would think like this game is sets up to likely be pretty competitive. And Bryce Perkins, even if he does play just 3 quarters, like that's enough with
Yeah.
his skill set. Like he could certainly be the top scoring quarterback on the slate. So yeah, we've got him a little bit over 10% ownership. I think I want to be. Well, let me look at the quarterbacks again and see if I disagree. Because again, I do think there are a number of pretty intriguing quarterback options on this slate. So I don't want to. Again, I'm concerned that I'm going to say that I'm going to be overweight on every single quarterback, and I don't want to do that. No,
Neil
I
just
think
needs super flex UFL. I
I
think
really do. Like
that's the
I want to play these quarterbacks. 11% I think is fine. Like I'm probably not going to be significantly. I wanted to say I'm going to be overweight there, but then looking at all the other quarterbacks, I do have a kind of interest in a lot of these quarterbacks. So yeah, I think 11% feels about right.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, the nice thing with a guy like Perkins is, obviously you can leave him naked because he is a great runner. And this wide receiver rotation, extremely condensed between COC Mariner, Malik Turner, and Jalen Moore. Last week, let me pull up the numbers here, but route shares were pretty clearly COC Mariner 80%, Malik Turner 83%, and then Jalen Moore at 76%. So it really seems like they've settled on their 11 personnel grouping. This slate also has a showdown, and interestingly, Cole Hicatini logged a season high 76% route share. I don't think I'm going to get to Hicatini on the main slate, but I did note in my article that for showdown, he's a really strong play, only 1,600. He's actually cheaper than his backup tight end. So I do think that's a really fun way to maybe get a little different in the Saturday showdown slate. Neil, do you have any preference when it comes to these pass catchers? I will largely be mixing and matching here, probably mostly single stacks for me, given, Perkins' abilities with his legs.
Yeah, I mean, COC Mariner at 12%. Love that at
Yeah.
7,600. Like he is I think he's still the wide receiver one there. So yeah, I like COC Mariner quite a bit at that number. Malik Turner, 24%. Hard to argue with it. Like he's been like pretty consistent. They seem to he hasn't, I don't know that he's flashed a ceiling yet, but like his floor has been pretty good in terms of usage. So I think that is fine. And then Jalen Moore is, yeah, only 4,500. I think he is probably I think I actually like Jalen Moore maybe better than Malik Turner when you factor in price and ownership. Like I think I'll be overweight to the 9% we have going to Jalen Moore. I'll probably be close to the field on Malik Turner, if anything, maybe a little bit light. But yeah, I really like COC Mariner. I think I'm going to be overweight on the 12% we have going to Mariner. I think I'm going to be overweight to the 9% we have going to Jalen Moore. And I might match the field on Malik Turner. Just, yeah, I think this is a great spot. Like just when you can condense the wide receiver rotation, and it's a team that is, expected to put up some points with solid quarterback play. I like them. I think these are all strong options.
Yeah, I am right there with you. I think my favorite would probably be Mariner. Just feels like a bit of a flop leg. Turner's been leading the way in targets over the last 3 weeks. Malik Turner is at a 23% target share compared to only 16% for Mariner. I mean, the team knows Mariner is a great player. He's still out there. I believe it was post game last week. Bryce Perkins, sort of casually mentioned maybe getting the ball to COC Mariner a little bit more. I'm not sure how much that matters. Not really something we're factoring into projections a ton, but if you want to buy in to a narrative, I think, if there's a squeaky wheel that they want to force the ball to, it would certainly be COC Mariner. Running back room, I was kind of hopeful after the way Nate McCrary ran last week that we might get a 2 running back rotation this week. I actually specifically asked Panthers head coach Mike Nolan about it, and he said there would be some games where they keep 2 running backs up and some where they keep 3 running backs up, but he did note that because their running back room is still beat up, now this was on Tuesday, it will likely be a 3 running back rotation this week. Also said that he loves that all 3 running backs are very different players and that they've all, for the most part, been playing very well. So unfortunately, probably a gross rotation for Michigan again. Last week, we saw McCrary lead the way with 48% of snaps, 8.6 backfield weighted opportunities. Toa Tawa, whose name I have been grossly mispronouncing for the last couple of weeks, he was at 28% of snaps, 5.8 weighted opportunities. Jaden Sheridan, 5.4 weighted opportunities, 25% of snaps. Really gross backfield. I don't necessarily know if I can get there on any of these guys. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Neil.
Yeah, I'm still figuring out my thoughts here because it's another one of like running back is so gross. Like
Yeah,
that's it's
it's
like
really tough.
you do have to play somebody. I don't love the like Tawa's price tag. I always thought it was Taua also.
I
Price tag
mean,
has
we were
yeah,
adding an extra syllable, but we've
yeah.
learned. That's what
It's a
spring
cool
football's
name
about.
either way.
Yeah,
That's the
it
thing.
is.
Either
That's
way
true.
you pronounce it, very cool name. Like he's moved up to $5,000. I love that he gets some red zone opportunities. I think this team, like I think there is some possibility that Michigan actually like that St. Louis just cannot really move the ball with
Yeah,
Max Duggan. Like I think that's a real possibility.
for
So
sure.
this could end up being a blowout situation where they're running out the clock and we're gonna really wish we had one of these guys. But again, it's just so gross because we don't know which like we don't feel that confident in which one of these guys we would want in that scenario. I think 5,800 for Jaden Sheridan is kind of unplayable in the main slate for me. I don't think we need to go there.
Yeah, and I think he's the least likely to earn any sort of backfield red zone opportunities. I think, very clearly Michigan, and this has been true over the last 2 seasons, these bigger bodied guys are the guys that they want to get the red zone touches, and that's very clearly Toa Tawa and Nate McCrary. So Sheridan would be the odd man out on red zone touches, and I really think, pretty much any fantasy value, especially in tournaments from this backfield, is going to come from touchdowns. And I could see either McCrary or Toa Tawa, getting you the probably two touchdowns that you need for them to be in a winning tournament lineup.
Yeah, we have another positive is we have Nate McCrary at 3% ownership. We have Toa Tawa at 0%. I do
Yeah.
think that I want to be slightly above weight on both those numbers, which is to say I want to have maybe 5 to 6% McCrary. And obviously, when I make my lineups, I don't end up with exactly how much I think in theory I should have, but like I think I'd like to be at like 6% McCrary, 2% Toa Tau. It feels about where I'd like to be out
Yeah.
of 150 in the largest field tournaments. Cause I think like, yeah, it wouldn't be not that strange if they end up just absolutely crushing St. Louis. And I don't say that lightly. I think St. Louis is a good team, but just quarterback play is important here. And they've seemingly downgraded pretty significantly here. So could end up being a blowout. So I think both these guys I want to be slightly overweight on.
Yep. I'm feeling pretty similar to you. I think McCrary especially is the guy I'd like to take some chances on. I still think his projection is maybe taking a bit too much of a hit industry wide from his, sort of injury prone week 3 game. So something to keep in mind there. But, of course, McCrary could get the majority of backfield work and Toa could still come in and steal those inside the 5 carries. So it is a bit of a fickle projection on either of those guys, but certainly worth taking a shot on. For tournaments on the St. Louis side of this game, we have Max Duggan. And Neil, after rewatching this game, I feel like I came up with a very easy player comp for Duggan. He's slightly more athletic, Case Cookus. I mean, he is ready to die on the football field, which I have a lot of respect for. It does make you a little anxious when you're playing the guy in DFS. And he did appear to be, pretty rushed with his reads. He seemed pretty nervous back there throwing. Part of me kind of felt like it was just a game speed thing for Duggan. Obviously his last serious action was in college football. UFL does play a little bit faster, even when you're playing higher level college football at a place like TCU. Maybe things start to slow down for him a little bit, but at least for the foreseeable future, this guy is going to be, Max Duggan is going to be the St. Louis Battlehawks starter. I believe it was an Achilles for Manny Wilkins, which is very, very unfortunate. Yeah, Neil, I'm curious where you're at on Duggan, who, we don't get the same price discount on him that we were getting on Case Cookus. Duggan, 8,900, which is a bit of a trickier price. He also gets Akeem Butler back, which, probably makes these ancillary guys, like the Frank Darby's, Denzel Mims of the world, makes those guys close to unplayable. I still think Gary Jennings is pretty interesting for what it's worth. But yeah, any interest in, Duggan, I think pretty easy to play him naked after he had 10 carries last week, or Duggan plus Pearson, Duggan plus Butler. What are you thinking of the Battlehawks right now?
I don't know that I get to any Duggan. I
Okay.
don't think he's a terrible play at 5%. Just I like some of the other quarterback plays better, so he's kind of getting squeezed for me a little bit. I don't know. I'm torn because he, like you said, he runs a bit. Like you kind of love
Yeah.
those guys who just play like a bat out of hell. But Michigan's defense is also pretty good, so I think we have some reasons to be skeptical here. Do you disagree with Michigan's defense being pretty good? Maybe I'm.
No, I mean, it's been solid. I think the defense that I'm the most afraid of right now is DC. But I mean, Michigan has been fine. 5.4 yards per attempt allowed. That's third toughest in the UFL. 3.1 yards per carry allowed. That is second toughest. So certainly an above average defense. I do think losing Breland Speaks a few weeks ago hurt them. He should be back in a few weeks though. But yeah, at least for this week, I'm probably treating them as maybe a slightly better than neutral defense.
Yeah, I mean, they even just last week, and I don't remember who they played last week, but they only allowed 87 pass yards, 70 rush yards. So it doesn't seem like they've been like that much worse. I don't know, like they're certainly not of the like Houston caliber of defense here. So it's sort of a tough spot here for Duggan. I'm torn because I was going to say, like, I think I'm just going to get there through the pass catchers. Cause as you know, I have been a sucker for Ja'Cour Pearson. I keep playing him. He keeps letting me down over and over. Like I've been playing so much Ja'Cour Pearson, just tanking my lineups over and over. Thank God Hakeem Butler is back to save me from myself a little bit. But I think like coming in at 2% ownership, I think I'll still probably be above weight to Ja'Cour Pearson. But I prefer Hakeem Butler, like, because I think Hakeem Butler, and this is probably something that is one of those things that I think that might not be true, but like the giant receiver seems better for a not particularly accurate quarterback. Just like throw it up there, let the big guy go get it. I feel like Hakeem Butler could kind of fit that. If he's not the most accurate quarterback, Hakeem Butler could be good for him. And just like the price tag has come down enough on Hakeem Butler, and we have not seen him do it yet this year, but we know we've seen it multiple years in the past that he's just a dude in spring football and can just make things happen. So I really like Hakeem Butler at 6,800. I want to be definitely overweight on 2% ownership there. I'm 2% of Ja'Cour Pearson seems fine. I don't think I'm going to make the same mistake I've been making. I don't think I'm going to jam, but I'll probably be above weight to 2% there. And then I'm torn on if I'm going to have any Duggan. If I do, I'm probably not going to have a ton, but I might have sprinkling, but I'll probably be underweight to the 5% there.
Yeah, I think I like Duggan a little bit more than you. I imagine I end up a little overweight there. I think my favorite stacking partner with him is pretty easily Hakeem Butler. Has scored over 34.5 DraftKings points twice last season. Also finished second in receptions of 20 plus yards. So big play machine. And, obviously there's a decent amount of risk with that, but in large field tournaments, I certainly like taking the chance. Also, Gary Jennings last week, 41% target share. I don't expect him to quite log the 93% route share that he had last week. We'll probably be closer to the 75% that we saw in week 1 with Butler back in the fold. But I would go, if I'm playing Duggan, I think Butler's my favorite, Gary Jennings number 2, and then Ja'Cour Pearson would be my third favorite option. Not really sure anyone else among those pass catchers is particularly playable outside of Showdown. Shout out fantasy guru Drew in the chat. Drew, not a draft stream. We are not talking NFL draft. This is going to be the week 5 UFL breakdown, because me and Neil are sickos that love competing for a handful of dollars available on the UFL main slate. Let's see. Backfield here is pretty straightforward. And I actually think in terms of percentage of usage, Jacob Saylors' usage is going to go up with Max Duggan starting. Like I've sort of mentioned in previous shows, when St. Louis runs fewer plays and when they trail or when they're in neutral scripts, we see more Saylors. When they're running a lot more plays and when they're leading, we see a little bit more Jarvion Howard. Last week, Jacob Saylors with 82% of backfield weighted opportunity on an 84% snap share. Really, really strong usage for Jacob Saylors. Now, the big hit with Duggan playing quarterback for Saylors is that offensive efficiency is going to trend down. St. Louis isn't going to gain as many yards. That obviously hurts Jacob Saylors. But, if he's a lock for, say, 12 to 18 carries and another 3 or 4 targets, I mean, pretty easily the best running back play of the slate, or at least right there as the best running back play of the slate, even though he's expensive, 11,500. But I think 40% ownership is pretty reasonable. I could easily see myself ending up overweight there. Where are you at on Saylors, Neil?
I think I'll probably be overweight. Just with running back being so gross on this slate, we know what the floor is for Saylors, and the ceiling is still there also. So yeah, I think at this number, even though he is 11, he's so expensive. But just we have so much uncertainty in running backs across the league, and as we've learned, just lean into the things that we do know is usually pretty profitable, and we know that Jacob Saylors is going to get a ton of action here. So yeah, I like Saylors quite a bit. I expect I'll be overweight there.
Yeah, right there with you. We basically saw like a true floor game from Saylors last week, and it was still 8.7 fantasy points. I mean, I don't know if anyone in like the top 5 of contests had Saylors, but I mean, you could have easily put a top, 2-3% finish together still with Jacob Saylors only scoring 8.7 fantasy points in your lineup. Alrighty, we are all clear to move on to the Sunday slate. 2-game Sunday slate kicks off with DC Defenders at the Arlington Renegades. DC is a 3.5-point underdog here. Total is 39.5. Neil, I don't know about you. I really like DC plus 3.5. I think, there's an argument that DC is just an outright better team. Obviously, this game is in Arlington, but they aren't drawing a ton of fans. I don't think, home field advantage probably isn't a huge factor when all players are returning to Arlington during the week anyway to practice. So this is just the stadium's just a short bus drive away for both teams. And like I said, there aren't many fans. So I don't know how much of a home field advantage you should really be baking in for Arlington here. Our numbers have this closer to like a 1.5, 2-point spread in favor of Arlington. Where are you at on this betting line?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I like DC here.
Yeah.
I'll take DC with the points. I think they're arguably the best team. They're one of the top teams in the league for sure. I think they might be they should be favored here. So I think I'm with you on that. I don't know if I like the under. I was debating if I also like taking the under in this game just because DC's defense is so good. They're like, I think, clearly the best defense in the league, and Arlington is certainly above average. So yeah, I kind of like taking the under, but definitely like the DC with the points also.
Yeah, I feel kind of neutral about the under. Overall, I do feel like this is probably my favorite game to stack of the week, especially with the sheer amount of plays that DC is running. We'll talk about that shortly. Quickly, though, injuries. Deontay Burnett is nursing a rib injury that he suffered on his only touch last week. So if you're wondering why Deontay Burnett's route share was so unusually low last week, it was due to the rib injury. He was limited in Wednesday's practice. That is worth monitoring. I don't necessarily think a Burnett absence is like a huge boost to any individual player. I think it broadly means more routes for Isaiah Winstead, Javonte Payton, Tyler Vaughns, and maybe a little bit more for a guy like Lawan Winningham. But yeah, those routes will be spread out because, like I've noted in previous shows, Arlington seems to really be spreading out the positions their wide receivers are playing, unlike a lot of teams in spring football. Neil, we can start with the DC side. And I think, the big thing with DC, and this was something I discounted in projections last week. And I think I had pretty good reason to do so. And I'm going to backpedal. I'm going to capitulate a little bit on that take. DC 67.5 plays per game. Last year's leader in the UFL in plays per game was San Antonio at 58.5. This is extreme pace that we're seeing from DC. And initially I was thinking, there's no way DC can sustain 64, 65, 66 plays per game, given how prohibitive the UFL rules are to pace. I mean, the clock runs even on incompletions. And yet DC is still moving at a ridiculous pace. Something I noted while I was watching film, sometimes they're snapping the ball with 20 seconds left in the play clock. They're pretty much getting every snap off with 10 seconds left in the play clock. Very, very rare. We have them projected for right around 63, 64 plays this week. But that makes Jordan Te'amu a pretty good play. And generally, I'm not one to, advocate for Te'amu in a week where he's projecting to be fairly popular. But when you combine fast pace with a very condensed target tree, I mean, if you need a player who's a little bit more expensive to pair with Te'amu, well, that's Chris Rowland, a guy, who's kind of in that mid-tier price range. That would be Cornell Powell. And then obviously we have the great salary saver in Braylon Sanders. So, Neil, I'm curious where you're at on Te'amu stacks. I feel like arguably the easiest double stack to make this week is like a Te'amu plus a Rowland plus a Sanders. I do expect that to be fairly popular. But yeah, really curious on your thoughts on DC.
Yeah, I think I'm in line more with your original takes, which is that I think that this is probably like not entirely unsustainable. Like I don't think they can't come close to where they're at in terms of the play volume. But my guess is that it comes down over the second half of the season. You also kind of need the opponent to be to give them the opportunities to run that many plays. Also, they also ran the ball 25 times 2 weeks ago with Abram Smith, probably more than that with their probably some for Deion Jackson there as well. So yeah, I think ultimately I think that this is too much ownership for Jordan Ta'amu. So I'm agreeing with your other point that I think that when Jordan Ta'amu comes in at high ownership, that's usually a spot that I want to fade. And I think that this is one where, and this is also partially because I like so many quarterbacks on the slate. I kind of like, I've been looking for like, who's a quarterback that I can poke holes in the ownership. And I feel like 21% for Jordan Ta'amu at 9,800 in a not a great matchup. There is the potential for this game to go completely off. So I agree with you, like game stacking this one, because these are offenses that have been together for at least last year, I think 2 years now. Both of these offenses are like largely still in place with a lot of the same players, which, kind of high variance there. Maybe they just all have their shit together and they're going to put up a lot of points here, but also really tough defenses. So I think a lot of ways this game can go. So I like the idea of game stacking it in some lineups, but I also think ultimately I'm going to be probably about half the field on Jordan Ta'amu, like get to around 10% there. I think that seems fair in this matchup with so many solid quarterback plays on this slate and a kind of volatile quarterback here. But I'll still play the wide receiver. So I think Ta'amu himself, I'm going to be about half the field. But I agree with you. Like these wide receivers look like strong plays. I like Roland. I'm going to be 43% Roland. I'm going to be underweight to that for sure. That is a bit too much. Like the price is coming up, the ownership is coming up, and he's not a sure thing by any means. Cornell Powell, 29% seems fair at 5,700. And then Braylon Sanders, 4,000. I like that. Like he clearly has a pretty strong role here. So I do like the wide receivers 2 and 3 in particular. I really like Braylon Sanders and Cornell Powell. Chris Rowland, that's too much. I'll be underweight to the field there, but I still think like he's obviously a strong player. I would love him if he was coming in at half the ownership, but that's just a little bit too much for me.
Yeah. I think I'm right there with you. Powell and Sanders, probably my favorite. Sanders last week, 73% route share, ended up finishing with 11.7 DraftKings points, 7 targets, 22% target share. So that's pretty nice. Also, just like really do not want to forget about Cornell Powell. I think a lot of the old, Ty Scott sort of designed one read, slants, outs. A lot of those are going to end up going to Cornell Powell, even if we didn't see it last week. So I think Powell will probably be my highest priority play of the 3, but they're all very, very viable within lineups. Neil, I feel like easiest leverage you could probably get on Ta'amu is by just jamming in Abram Smith, who everyone wanted to play last week and no one wants to play this week. Only 8% ownership on Abram Smith. He's not projecting particularly well at 8,300, but do you have any interest there?
Sorry, what is the ownership on?
We have 8%, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 8%.
Yeah, it seems fine. Like I don't think I'll be. I can't think of a reason to be too high over that. I mean, I guess he had 25 carries 2 weeks ago, so that is the best reason. It's not the best matchup. Arlington allowing 86.5 rush yards per game, so they're kind of a bottom half matchup. Whereas some of these, we have 3 teams allowing more than 120 rushing yards per game, so kind of a tough spot here for Abram Smith. I like your leverage angle. I think that is sharp. Like you can play it as just fade the passing game, play some Abram Smith. Ultimately, I don't think I'm going to be above the field. I think if anything, I'll probably be probably not too far below, but maybe a little bit below the field on Abram Smith.
Yeah, I mean, he's easy to argue against. Deion Jackson was up to 42% of snaps last week, which was a season high for him. So that, that's a little concerning. Deion Jackson also had both red zone rush attempts, although Abram Smith did earn the lone red zone target for this backfield. On like a 2-game slate, I think Deion Jackson is probably a little interesting. I certainly won't get there on the 4-game slate, but I don't mind like a little Abram Smith plus DC defense. That's something I'm generally, I'll submit whatever the max is, 50, 52 lineups for the main. I'll have a little bit of Abram Smith plus DC defense. I think that's good there, especially with, just the way this defense plays. It's, I feel like it's kind of conducive to either, big defensive scores because they blitz so much, or a ton of, allowing like a ton of big plays and really opening the game up to more of like a shootout type script. So another thing to keep in mind with the DC side of this game. Arlington is, a lot of teams have things in flux. Arlington, not so much. I mean, we have the Deontay Burnett injury to worry about, but otherwise, this team is, largely what we've talked about throughout the season, Neil. Luis Perez, once again, not really projecting for any ownership. Last week, obviously Ta'amu put up a massive score, but if you sort of discount that and then you give Perez that 52-yard touchdown to Tyler Vaughn, so they got called back on a super challenge. I mean, Perez could have ended up as the optimal quarterback last week. So yeah, where are you at on Luis Perez? And I think, a lot of these pass catchers are pretty interesting, especially without Burnett. I think you could make compelling arguments for all of Vaughn's, Winstead, Javonte Payton, and of course Sal Cannella. So yeah, what are your thoughts on Luis Perez stacks this week?
I don't think I'm going to play a ton of Luis Perez, except for just again, like just game stacking makes a ton of sense to me. I love that call of yours. I think like it does make sense to just like, what if the offenses just went out? Because these are offenses that have been together. They are fairly condensed. So yeah, Tyler Vaughn's 6,700 as an individual play, 22% ownership. I think that's totally reasonable, even in a tough matchup, just because of the price tag. The role I think looks pretty good here. Sal Cannella is expensive, so I don't think I'll be above 11% Sal Cannella. Like I think I'll probably be a little bit below the field, I would guess, on Sal Cannella. Again, just because really tough matchup and he's expensive, but yeah, strong enough play. Winstead up at 6,900. I think I'll probably be slightly below the field. So ultimately, I think I have a slight negative on this offense, a slight negative opinion of this offense in this matchup at this ownership. I think I'll be a little bit underweight to the field here, but you can also see, like, obviously I can see the scenario where the game goes completely off. So I'll have some portion of my lineups just be game stacks of DC Arlington, but I think on both sides, this is going to be a game that I'm going to be a little bit underweight, like as a whole.
Okay, that's interesting. I think I'll probably end up being pretty overweight this game. I really love like just going full game stack. I mean, you can play 6 players from this game and then just, pick a defense from another game and hope this game, ends up scoring 60 points. My favorite among the Arlington wide receivers, and I mean, I suppose this isn't a massively contrarian take based on ownership, but Tyler Vaughn's 18 targets over the last 2 weeks. He's now sub 7K, would have finished with 19.4 DraftKings fantasy points per game if his 52-yard touchdown from Perez was not overturned on a super challenge. I kind of love the way Anthony Becht landed on challenging that play. He was like, yeah, the vibes were just off, man. So I threw the challenge flag, and it's like, hell yeah.
He's great. I love Anthony Becht.
Oh, he rocks. He seems like he'd be a really fun guy to hang out with. Arlington backfield, Kalen Ballage was at 58% of snaps. He led the way in terms of backfield opportunity. Fairly similar to what we saw last week. Unfortunately, Day Hunter did score the lone touchdown for these running backs. Both players finished with 3 targets. Ballage was at 49% of backfield weighted opportunity. Hunter was at 42%. And then, of course, Davion Smith came in for his standard short yardage rush attempts. I believe he also earned 1 inside the 5. Any love for Ballage, Day Hunter? This kind of feels like CJ Maribel, Ricky Person with like a little bit more juice, maybe.
A little bit more juice, a little bit worse matchup. I mean, DC's just been a really strong defense, so I think I'll be underweight. Kalen Ballage just a little bit too expensive at 7,500. I'll be. I don't want to be like too far underweight and like give too much credit to the defenses here, because any game, this is football. Like weird things can happen. They can break off plays, and Ballage should have some opportunity. So I'll be probably a little bit underweight to Ballage. I kind of like Day Hunter now. Like I've come around to. He's only 6,500. 8% ownership. I don't like him enough that I'm going to be like jamming, but I think I'll be probably close to the field at 8%. So maybe I shouldn't say I like it, because I'm still like I might end up underweight to the field on Day Hunter, but I think he's become playable, I guess. Just he's been good enough, had a good enough role that I think 8% seems okay.
Yeah, most interesting thing about Day Hunter is that he's so small compared to these other backs, and yet he leads the backfield and inside the 10 carries over the course of the season. And I actually thought his goal line touchdown last week was really, really impressive. I mean, he looked stopped dead in his tracks and fought through it despite only being, I believe he weighs like 190, 195. So pretty light, but they trust him at the goal line. I feel pretty neutral about both guys relative to ownership. Might give a slight lean to Day Hunter. It seems like everyone who's playing UFL DFS is like, Ballage is the better back. Ballage is the guy I feel more comfortable clicking, which I totally understand. I mean, that's largely been me these last few weeks. But I do think you need to give some credit to a discounted Day Hunter. He's 1,000 cheaper, probably going to log lower ownership as well, because everyone seems to like clicking Kalen Ballage. All right, we can move on to the final game of the slate. It's the Houston Roughnecks at the San Antonio Brahmas. Houston, 3.5-point underdog here. Total is 38.5. Neil, I'm not sure about you, but I kind of like the under here. We were pricing this game a little bit closer to like 36.5, 37. Both of these teams kind of suck. Although San Antonio has had a little bit more life lately. What do you think about this betting line?
I think it's about fair.
Okay.
The defenses are just so bad
Yeah,
that I'm like,
that's the problem.
yeah, because I think this might be a place where San Antonio can actually put up some points here. So my biggest take, of course, is go Brahmas. Brahmas gonna crush Houston, take the Brahmas to win the game. I don't feel strongly about this over under. I think it's probably fair.
Gotcha. All right. Plenty of injury news to get through. On the Houston side, Kirk Merritt is off the injury report. He is expected to play. CJ Johnson said that he will play for whatever that is worth. Lawrence Keys did not practice on Wednesday due to a groin issue. That's certainly worth monitoring. Nolan Henderson has also been limited with a shoulder injury. He will not start. Jalen McClendon will be the starter this week, but certainly worth monitoring to see if Henderson is the backup. I think, if Henderson were to get healthy, he'd probably be a little bit more likely to earn reps as the QB2 than Anthony Brown, but this is also Houston that we're talking about. So like prescribing any sort of rationality to how they rotate these quarterbacks or don't rotate these quarterbacks is probably a fool's errand. On the San Antonio side, Jacob Harris did not practice on Wednesday with a calf injury. Definitely need to keep an eye on him if he can't go. I would expect a full-time route share for Justin Smith. Alize Mack was limited with a hamstring injury after missing last week. Only relevant for the showdown slate, really, but if Mack misses, Steven Stylianos will earn a full-time route share. Neil, the other thing that I wanted to note for this game, and really for both Sunday games, is last week was the first week that we did not get a depth chart before the Friday 8 p.m. game locked. So really need to keep that in mind. We may go into slate lock kind of blind on who's active, who's inactive for these Sunday games. I think it's largely more relevant for Houston and San Antonio. Obviously, we have the Burnett injury to worry about in the Arlington game, but guys like Lawrence Keys and Jacob Harris obviously are fairly in play for main slate if they're up. So definitely need to get your swaps ready. Neil, we can start with the Houston side here. Jalen McClendon looked pretty good last week. I think there is strangely a chance that CJ Johnson and the Houston Roughnecks started these quarterbacks in reverse order of their actual skill, which is quite impressive. Now, I had a couple notes on McClendon, and I think he's very interesting. And the main reason is because since 2014, which is when he started college, he's only dropped back 370 times. Now, keep in mind, Luis Perez had 354 dropbacks last season. So Jalen McClendon over the last decade has dropped back about as much as Perez did in 2024. This guy has no reps, almost no film. And he's clearly talented. Like he's a good athlete. He's got a rocket arm, and he seems pretty accurate when he actually sets his feet and has a good target in mind. I think, the raw talent here certainly opens the door to the idea that there's a ton of untapped potential in Jalen McClendon. The problem, Neil, is that he's on the Houston Roughnecks. Are they the team that's actually going to unlock his potential? I mean, probably not. But after what we saw last week, I do think we need to give that some space. I'm curious where you're at on McClendon. I'm anticipating a full game. I did give, I believe it was Anthony Brown, a little bit of a drop back share, a small amount of rush share. We could see a small rotation here. We could also see a shorter leash for McClendon because, he did start the season as QB3. And Curtis Johnson is just an insane person. So who knows what he could do. But yeah, where are you at on McClendon and some of these Houston pass catchers?
Well, I'll just point this out. In 2 weeks without Wade Phillips, the Brahmas are giving up 257 passing yards per game. That is lapping the field in terms of how many passing yards they are allowing. So that is a point in McClendon's favor. Looks like he's a pretty good runner. Looks like he's not a bad quarterback out there. So yeah, I think McClendon 14% feels about right. I think I'll be pretty close to the field there. Hard to argue with it just given the matchup with San Antonio. This is another one of those games I think just has high volatility here because it's two not great offenses against two not great defenses, which are often spots that I like to target in DFS. So yeah, I think McClendon looks pretty good. I think 14% seems totally fair. He is 9,100. I would like him better if he was like 8,400. Then I would be like, This is a really good play. I think I'll be above weight to the field. At this price tag, I think I'm going to be probably pretty close to the field. If anything, I might be slightly underweight, but yeah, hard to really argue with it in this matchup. Yeah, I think McClendon looks totally fine. And then, of course, you can always play Justin Hall. Now, 33% ownership to me is a bit too much for Justin Hall, even in a great matchup with the Brahmas. That is because I'm not totally sold that Jalen McClendon is going to be great going forward. I think like he looked like he gave the offense some juice, but I'm not sure that I'm totally buying into it. So 33%, a little bit too high for me, but yeah, I think I like Justin Hall a bit. And then of course you've got Marcus Sims. What are we doing? What are we doing with Sims? I'm totally torn here because that's insane that his usage dropped in week 2.
That's the thing is Lawrence Keys was at a 92% route share in week 4, which was one of the most shocking usage notes that I found in week 4. I kind of thought, oh, Marcus Sims will slowly emerge here, slowly displace Keys as a starter. Marcus Sims' route share went from 28% in week 3 to 16% in week 4. Now, keep in mind, Houston traded a starting offensive tackle for a receiver that they don't seem to intend on playing at all. Also interesting, I thought that, in week 3, they were very keen on getting Sims these design touches, a couple on underneath routes, but a lot of screens as well. This past week, we really didn't see that. So I don't know what's going on with Sims. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Sims was at like a 50 or 60% route share this week and Lawrence Keys takes a back seat. We could also see what we saw last week where Lawrence Keys is the clear starter and Sims is, basically relegated to the bench. If Keys were to sit, I think we'll definitely see a lot more Sims. We'll probably see a little bit more TJ Vasher as well.
I think we actually do know what's happening here.
Okay.
Curtis Johnson's happening. I mean, it's literally it. He's the most illogical coach in the history of football coaches. Like, you just cannot predict what he is going to do week to week. Usually he's doing what is like obviously wrong. And I think isn't that exactly like, that's it, right? It's just Curtis Johnson.
Yeah. I think it is Curtis Johnson. I tweeted a video of a segment from Houston's game in week 4 where Curtis Johnson was down 5 points, and instead of going for 2 to make it a 3-point game, he decided to go for 1. Birmingham was so confused by this. They did not anticipate a 1-point conversion. They called a timeout. CJ Johnson then yells at Jalen McClendon to run to the sideline faster. It's a timeout. I think we can take our time. And and then he still goes for 1 point after. What was funny was I tweeted that out, and then there were Houston fan accounts saying like, "Oh, you can't be critical of CJ for that. He made like 3 dumber mistakes throughout that game. Like,
and they're right.
That stuff." And it's like, okay, sure, they're right, but like, come on. I mean, this is a hilarious clip, and it still is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I mean, CJ Johnson is just a really, really bad football coach, and that makes it incredibly hard to project his players for fantasy football. All right, back to these wide receivers, though, Neil. Lawrence Keys, I think, is a really strong play as like a value guy. The problem is he might be inactive, and we also could see his route share swing, fairly wildly, as I mentioned, because of the weird usage with Marcus Sims. How do you treat a guy who, at 3,400, the only viable pivot, really, if we find out he's inactive, would probably be Justin Smith, but we would need Jacob Harris to be inactive for Justin Smith to be viable. I mean, you could go to like a Jordan Thomas, I guess. Oh, well, he's in the first game, so you couldn't get to Thomas. I'm just looking at these last 3 games.
Well, we'll know by Sunday, though, right? So like we
would have the Saturdays and 2 Sunday games to try to figure out who the swaps would be, but there really isn't anyone who I think would be particularly viable here, and that will drive down Keys' ownership a decent bit too. You leave a little salary. Gary Jennings.
I mean, well, because we have at least 2 games, we can do 2v2 swaps. Like I think
that's
viable
true.
to play.
That's true.
Just do 2v2.
I guess, broadly speaking, I would just keep that in mind, especially with a guy like Lawrence Keys. And I don't know a ton of people are going to do this, but if you wanted to like stack up Memphis, Birmingham super heavy and then leave 3,400 for just Lawrence Keys, that could put you in a really tricky spot if you needed to swap. So that is something that I wanted to highlight there. I don't know if I'm going to play a ton of Keys. He's projecting for 6%. I mean, it's tough. I think most of my McClendon will probably be with Justin Hall, a little bit of Chisholm, and then a little bit of Keys. Anything to add there? We've probably spent enough time talking about Houston pass catchers.
I just have to say, like, because it is Curtis Johnson and things can change somewhat. Like Marcus Sims is still sort of interesting. He's still like, I think a really good, like he's a top I think you said top 8. I said top 5. He's in that realm of receivers in the UFL. So very talented receiver. Who knows what happened last week? Probably just Curtis Johnson forgot that he was on the team, and maybe somebody reminds him this week. So maybe we see a big uptick in Marcus Sims. I think he is at the very least very playable on the Sunday only slate, and a strong pivot if you like really need to make up ground on Sunday. I don't know how much, if I'll go into the slate planning on playing much, if any, Marcus Sims in the 4-gamer. But yeah, I think he makes sense as a pivot at the very least. Yeah, so I'll add that. But yeah, it's I don't know. I think Justin Hall, a little bit too much ownership. Kiki Chisholm is what's his ownership at? 0% at 5,800. I guess if we get Lawrence Keys out, you can pivot there also. But yeah, I think it's mostly Justin Hall and Lawrence Keys if he's active.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Love the shout out on Sims, especially for Sunday only. I mean, there's so much like volatility in how they could deploy these outside wide receivers, as we sort of noted throughout this conversation. So taking some stabs at Sims for Sunday only, I think is really interesting. And any assumption with Houston is tough, but you would assume a guy like Marcus Sims would get go routes and would have a decent chance at like a 70-yard touchdown. Haven't seen that yet with Houston, so maybe we can't assume that, but I do think, probably makes him worth taking a shot on. For Sunday only, backfield, I think we can breeze through. Looks like all 3 of these backs are going to be active, and that makes it really, really tough. We saw this exact setup in week 2 for Houston, where Zaquandre White, Kirk Merritt, and Lorenzo Lingard were all up. Zaquandre White led the backfield with only 7.4 weighted opportunities. His price has also increased a little bit. He's up to 6,700. Do you have any interest in Zaquandre White or Kirk Merritt for this one?
Kirk Merritt a little bit, just because he's only 6,000. Could be more involved in the passing game, but not a ton in anybody. I don't think I'm not playing any Lingard, probably not playing any Zaquandre White. I might get to a bit of Kirk Merritt, but it would be just a very small amount in large field in the main slate. Viable, I think, on the Sunday slate, but mostly just because it is a great matchup. So that's the one thing. It's like I can't completely forget about them when they're playing against San Antonio, who, again, over the past 2 weeks, allowing 115.5 rush yards per game. That is the second most, behind only Memphis in terms of rushing yards allowed over the past 2 weeks. So it's a great spot, but yeah, I don't feel particularly great about anybody in this backfield.
Yep, think that makes sense. All right, we can move on to the San Antonio side of this game. Kellen Mond actually projecting to be pretty popular, certainly the most popular he will have been since week 1. We have him at 13% ownership. I think that kind of speaks to just the weirdness of this quarterback slate. There aren't a ton of guys that we can click on with much confidence here. Neil, what are your thoughts on Kellen Mond and the San Antonio passing attack? Obviously San Antonio has looked a little bit more competent as a passing offense over these last couple of weeks, and they have a great matchup. What do you think here?
I like it. I'm going to be overweight to the field on Kellen Mond. I was trying to pull up the Brahmas scores so far this year. So they played the Defenders, which is best defense in the league. They played Michigan, one of the best defense. They played St. Louis. I think they played maybe the 4 best defense in the league: Arlington, St. Louis, Michigan, DC. So it's been, I think this is like easily the best matchup that Kellen Mond has had against Houston. I mean, it's the best matchup in the league. So yeah, just given like coming into the year, I thought Kellen Mond was going to look really good. Now this coaching staff has talked about wanting him to run a little bit more. It's an ideal matchup. Everything is setting up for me to want to play a lot of Kellen Mond. So yeah, I think I'm going to be double the field. So I think I'll be underweight on Jordan Teamu. I think I'll be underweight a little bit on Jalen McClendon. Max Duggan, I'm a little bit more like, maybe I can get to 5%. But I think maybe double the field is a bit much, but I think I'll probably get to 20-ish% Kellen Mond. I think he's really strong play, just given that, we've seen him. He's been not amazing so far. But last week was his best week so far, and he's only had bad matchups so far. So this is his first, I would say, like really plus matchup, and it's the best possible matchup. And he's, the coaches want him to run more, so everything kind of coming together. I think this could be a blow up spot for Kellen Mond.
Yeah, certainly think that's an interesting take. And I mean, he's looked a lot more comfortable and just sort of competent the
Yeah.
last few weeks as well. So definitely like that. When it comes to wide receivers, I guess we kind of have to talk, well, Jacob Harris being, appearing questionable at this point is certainly the big question mark here. I think, if Harris were to play, pretty obvious he's the lead wide receiver in this offense, then followed by guys like Jontre Kirkland and Greg Ward. They're running a lot more 11 personnel than 10 personnel. So like, especially for the Sunday only slate, and especially if both like Marquez Stevenson and Matthew Sexton are active, I still think really hard to click either guy for a 2-game slate when they're splitting backup slot routes that don't really exist much anymore because the team's running so much 11 personnel. Yeah, Neil, curious what you think of these pass catchers. I will say, though, if Jacob Harris ends up being out, Justin Smith is going to end up as probably the best raw value of the slate. I don't really see anyone else getting these routes. Kawan Baker is sort of the only other outside wide receiver they have left, and they kind of appear to just hate him. Like, he's barely played this year, barely been active. Yeah, where are you at on San Antonio pass catchers?
Yeah, it's tough because of the injury, because I think if Jacob Harris enters this game fully healthy at 6,500, I would want all of the Jacob Harris. I still think I think I'm playing it that way as though he is going to be active and healthy on game day. So I think I'm going to plan on having a lot of Jacob Harris because we do have some nice, pretty easy pivots if he does end up being out. As you said, Justin Smith becomes a pretty obvious, easy pivot here. I'm still going to go after some Greg Ward. I'm just a sucker for Greg Ward. He's out there, he's running routes. So I think he looks like a fine enough play, and he'll obviously look better if Jacob Harris is out, because they need to find other players to pass the ball to. I like Jontre Kirkland, even though he has lost a bit of his luster with Jacob Harris. No longer like the gonna get 10 targets in a game type of player. But if Jacob Harris is out, he would look great. And with Jacob Harris in, I still think he has big upside there. So yeah, I think if Jacob Harris is in, Jacob Harris is the best receiver here, followed by, I would say, probably Jontre Kirkland, then Greg Ward. If Jacob Harris is out, then it becomes really interesting. Then I think I'm going to really like Jontre Kirkland, because we've seen what the passing offense looks like without Jacob Harris, and it was the Jontre Kirkland show. So I think in that case, I would like Jontre Kirkland quite a bit, but I think Justin Smith becomes a strong value, and I would actually like Greg Ward quite a bit in that case as well. So yeah, I think this is going to be just a passing offense that I want to have a lot of.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. On this backfield, this was pretty interesting. Anthony McFarland led the way among all running backs in weighted opportunity last week at 18.3, which is a great workload, but he only finished with 9.9 DraftKings fantasy points, in part because Aiden Robbins actually stole the pair of touchdowns. Aiden Robbins, notably larger than both McFarland and Jayshon Corbin. That was something they pointed out on the broadcast. I believe he's almost 240 pounds, and San Antonio certainly treated Robbins as their goal line back. That said, Neil, 14 rush attempts, 5 targets for Anthony McFarland. And it seems clear that they're making a more concentrated effort to get him the ball in the passing game. Granted, I unfortunately think a lot of these touches are going to come outside of the 10-yard line. Where are you at on a guy who's been, hyper efficient, 7 yards per carry this year? Saw a good workload last week, but probably isn't live for any touches inside the 5, and probably not inside the 10 either.
I still like him, even without the 5-yard those inside the 5 carries. Just again, we have so few running backs that we can feel good about on this slate. McFarland's role outside of the red zone is just pretty strong here, and the matchup is as good as it can get. So just given the context of this slate, where we can't really feel too confident in many running backs, I think McFarland looks like the second best running back on the slate behind Jacob Saylors, and obviously the ownership is there as well, but I think it's warranted. I think I'm going to have a good amount of Anthony McFarland. I'll probably be above weight to that 28%. It was super frustrating for me last week when I also played a lot of Jayshon Corbin to see Aiden Robbins come in and get 2 rushing touchdowns. That was kind of brutal. I don't know. Are you playing any? I mean, if Aiden Robbins is going to be the goal line guy at 4,000, that's sort of interesting at 0% ownership. What do you think of him as a play?
That's probably more of a 2-game slate play for me. I mean, we did still see Corbin work in for a few inside the 10 touches. So, we could see Corbin steal those touchdowns, but it does seem like they want Aiden Robbins to be the guy inside the 10. He had 4 inside the 10 carries last week, despite signing with the team like 5 days prior. Although it does seem like running back, generally speaking, is kind of the easiest position to just pick up and play without really knowing the playbook or anything like that. I don't expect anything for Aiden Robbins outside of that basic goal line role. I think they feel a lot more comfortable with McFarland and even Corbin, sort of outside the red zone. But yeah, for the 2-game slate, this game also has its own showdown slate. Aiden Robbins, pretty interesting for those in particular. But yeah, wanted to second what you said on Anthony McFarland. This is a very, very difficult running back slate. That's largely what's going to push Anthony McFarland's ownership up. I mean, he's expensive. He had 42% of snaps last week, and he's still projecting to be pretty chalky. And yeah, it's largely just because he's, one of the handful of running backs we can bank on to get, say, 10 rush attempts, another 3, 4, 5 targets. It is thin out there in the running back streets in the UFL. But yeah, Neil, I think unless you have any other notes, I think that'll do it.
Yeah, I guess Aiden Robbins would be if you have 4,000 left over as a pivot, I guess it would make sense as a pivot in that case. But yeah, no, I don't think I have any other notes. Do you feel strongly about we never really talk about defenses? And I like sometimes I'm like I almost have takes on defenses, but I usually just kind of spread it out.
Yeah, Neil had to bring up defense after Arlington DST just absolutely buried me
right. Oh my
last
God,
week. Yeah. I mean, it's not like I didn't want to play with it in my mind too much, but I was thinking through like, okay, if Arlington scored like 8, like how would I have finished? Things obviously would have been very, very different. I'm not sure I have a ton of defensive takes. Birmingham defense, I think, looks pretty good against a quarterback that could absolutely suck and dress or win, but we also don't really know. And I think projections are largely taking that into account. Yeah, I mean, I'm always a little privy to an aggressive defense like DC. They can just as easily get burned by big plays. I rarely have defensive takes. I mean, I almost always let the projections and the Opta sort of take care of defense for me. Obviously, terrible decision last week. I should have done what the guy who won did and just lock in Arlington defense.
Clearly.
I think he played very impressive. I forget the username, but he had Arlington defense on, I believe, 7 of his 10 lineups and finished with 5 of them in the top 10 of the contest. Really cool. Do you have any defense takes? What defense should I play? Who's going to score 30 points?
I should not have brought this up, Jake, because no, I don't. I thought I had some earlier. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think Birmingham, I agree with you there, but it kind of seems like the best defenses are the ones that are getting ownership here. So I agree with you, DC. I love the aggressiveness there. I think that's interesting. They're also facing like one of the Spring King, so it's not the best matchup. Michigan is pretty interesting to me, but again, I think we have all the best defenses are getting the most ownership. So I brought it up in error. Disregard that we ever talked about it.
Yeah. Get defense out of my mind. Get week 4 defensive results out of my mind. Appreciate it though, Neil, and certainly appreciate everybody who's been commenting, watching, whether at Discord, on Twitter, YouTube. Really appreciate all of you guys. This was our first sort of joint stream with the Flannelverse. So shout out Flannelverse. Obviously, always an honor for me to be able to make an appearance on Neil's YouTube channel. I grew up a huge Neil Orfield fan, so really a full circle moment for me. But yeah, guys, that'll do it for the week 5 UFL breakdown. Really appreciate everyone for listening, and we will see you all at the top of the leaderboards.
What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.